Rosanna, can you?
Yes, now I hear you.
So you gotta be.
I hear you, but there's a lot of feedback.
All right. How,
Ed Santamaria, the assistant city manager is here, and we also have Jose Oliveros, who heads the capital improvements. He's the one that runs the project. We have Kevin Kinney, our parking director. We have Hermes Diaz, our public works director. George Gomez, our assistant public works director. Our communication director, Marcia Pantini, is here. And we also
She can
have
hear?
Zeta
Okay, they can hear.
Sardinas, who's our asset manager, and Julian, who runs economic development. The asset manager is in the economic development department. So we have a city staff here that's available, and for one of the presentations, we'll also have our project designers, and which is for the golf course shelter, and they'll be able to discuss that with you. So we'll start with maybe with the presentation.
Yeah, it looks like they can hear us now.
Yeah, they can.
Great. All right, so if we can get started, we have a presentation here for everyone. Oh, so some parameters real quick. We will have, at the end of the presentation, we'll have more than enough time. We'll answer all your questions. We also have it on the video. If you would be so kind as to let us, go through all the information, and then you'll have all the time in the world to ask questions at the end of the presentation. So thank you.
I'm going to move myself next to you so they can hear better because the audio is running through the laptop right now.
Okay. So that first picture is our golf course.
Beautiful.
Love that grass. Love it. All right, so quickly, we've already talked a lot about this, but it's we're doing virtual and in person. It's a hybrid meeting. We haven't done many of those, at least in the Parks Department, Community Recreation Department. So we're new to this. The meeting is recorded, as you probably heard really loud a few minutes ago. And once, as we talked about, we'll have more than enough time after the presentation for question and answers, and we'll also get any of them that are on the chat as well. Better for me to be out in here so I can actually see this slide without having to turn my back to the crowd. So here's a project of meeting history. The first community meeting that we held, it was in November of 2020. It was to discuss the pro shop renovation. The second meeting was held in February to discuss the rain shelter renovation. So for both meetings, we distributed the information via door hangers within 1,500 feet of the property. We also did a newspaper ad, social media outlets. We did public notice, and we also put it on the city e-news. So we tried to get the word out as much as we could. A quick history primer on the golf course and the pro shop history. The course was constructed in 1922. The pro shop building was added in 1962, and there was a small scale renovation in 1987. And it includes the 3,500 square foot part of the pro shop, and there's also the adjacent restaurant. We did renovate, as we said, in November 2015, we opened newly renovated greens, tee boxes, and fairways. So for the first project that we presented was the Granada Golf Pro Shop. So this is a satellite view. Everyone here, I'm sure, is well versed with what it looks like, but maybe not from so high. This is the existing interiors. This is what we really needed to take care of. And I think the project that we came up with, I think, is going to serve the community really well. This is the east view that shows the cart pickup area and the doors and windows that we're also replacing. So this is the floor plan that we have. So that office space that we saw in those first pictures that looked like just a maintenance closet. What we're going to do is we're going to have a proper office for the people that work out of the pro shop. We're able to put together a multi-purpose room with some empty space that is there. So we'll be able to do that as an activity room. For those of you that have been frequenting the golf course, if you've noticed, we started to develop a nice youth program. A lot of inclusion programming for autism for golf. And so we're able to have a space where it rains in the summer when it's hot, so we can do a little bit more programming and start getting our youth engaged in golf. I think it's been a great initiative that we've been doing, so that'll help. And you can do a lot of other things with it. You can do events, you can do meetings. There's a lot of flexibility, providing another indoor space for our city facility to provide for the community for all kinds of things. The activity office that is currently there will also continue to stay there, but it's going to be refurbished and there's going to be new workspaces. The lockers and the bathrooms will all be refurbished and renovated on both sides. And then, we have the viewing area, we'll have a TV, and we'll have kind of a lounging area in the pro shop and all the displays and the front desk that'll allow for displays and selling of merchandise. One thing that we did get on feedback during the meetings was to look at that the pro shop was too big, that we needed to, you know, increase more room in the restaurant side versus the pro shop side. So there is an increase. As you can see, the door changes. Instead of being in the middle, it kind of swings open down to the west. And then it allows for access for a bathroom if it can be an accessible bathroom in the future. So that was a direct relation to the input that we received to make it bigger. So that's what we did. And this is that new design. I can have the next one. What? Okay. So this is what we have existing. So you can see this is I'm sorry, this is not existing. This is our new design. What I wanted to say was this is the outside footprint. It kind of shows you what the entrances will look like. The big entrance is the entrance to the west. We have to make it accessible. So there'll be a pathway and it'll be a ramping to get in and have the proper sloping for all of the ADA accessibility requirements that we need. This is the elevation from the east. The entire pro shop will replace all the existing glass with impact glass and windows throughout the entire footprint of the pro shop. For all the glass that's there now, it'll be replaced with impact glass. This is a concept of what the inside will look like in terms of the finishes and the coloring. It'll be a modern design that will have a lot of finishes, and we'll go to the next slide and you can see the finishes, I believe. These are some of the colors for the ceramic tiles, what the lockers and the benches will look like, what the shower walls will look like. The flooring, it will be a tile, but it'll have that grain look. It's very similar to the type of flooring that we have at the Adult Activity Center. If anybody goes there, it is a very durable floor, and it's in terms of the look, it's a great look, and it's good for maintenance and cleanliness. These are concepts for the furniture. As we move forward with the project, they'll be looking at what furniture is available, and there'll be a budget for it. So we'll look at all that. But these are kind of the concept and inspirations of what we're looking to do in the interior. So to sum up on the pro shop is, you know, we're replacing the windows, we're improving the ADA access. Oh, I didn't mention the parking location that was there as part of the exterior access. And then we're looking at one of the things that I didn't mention, we are putting camera surveillance equipment in. As we go, it's a department-wide initiative that I'm doing. As I replace or renovate buildings, we kind of come up with the times in terms of having the proper cameras and those security systems. We did it at the youth center, the adult activity center. We did it at the new tennis center that we finished at the Biltmore. So we'll continue with that initiative as we go. And we discussed most of the interior enhancements. Ones that I did mention was there will be a new HVAC equipment and mechanical room. And we will have everything in terms of IT equipment and everything in there as well. Some of the things that will be updated features are there. We will have a drinking fountain that'll have a bottle filler. I know a lot of people ask about that. Obviously new floors, ceiling tiles, the restroom amenities. One thing that will probably be someone always asks us this is there'll be a baby changing table. They want to know why you have to do it in a golf course, but it's a requirement. It's not anything that we're doing because we think there's a lot of babies that need to be changed. It's just a requirement. So this is what our construction staging plan will be for the pro shop. We will have a temporary pro shop in the form of a trailer like we did with Biltmore. It'll be a temporary pro shop, as you can see it right along the parking lot. And that will be the fenced in area for the construction. So as we move into the rain shelters, a couple of things that we looked at before we even went into the project. This is just an overhead of of the entire course. So there was a review by the Historic Preservation Board, and in August of 2020, they held a public meeting to review the application. The board found, as it says in the presentation, the overall design of the proposed shelter does not destroy the integrity of the historic district. And then they made the following motions. A motion to approve the design approval for the construction of the new rain shelters and direct staff to work with the applicant to study the possibility of incorporating LED lights and trash receptacles into the design of the shelters. And then there was also a motion to recommend that the city preserve one of the existing shelters in an area and move it to an appropriate location as a reminder of what was there before. So as we move into discussing the design, when we had the, as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, when we had the presentation, we were looking for public input. So we got that input, which is why we're here again today, because there was, there was commentary that there were people that were opposed to the design of the shelter. So that's why we're here today. All right, at this point, I'm going to call up the project designers for the shelters from Guri Matuti. It's Daphne. She's going to come up and she will take over the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. And I'm very honored to be here. My name is Daphne Guri. I'm principal with Guri Matute, and I'm also here with my partner, Jose Matute. We're both the principals and owners for our firm. When we were asked to prepare and execute a design for these rain shelters, we were given these conditions. The existing shelters, as you can see, are in very bad shape. Many of them have already been demolished. We did research the significance of the period of time in which the historic district has its standards, and found that the period of significance is from 1922 to 1939. This was corroborated also by the Office of Historic Preservation, CARA's office. The shelters are in fact a historic resource. They're not designated historic, and that's an important aspect in how we proceeded with the city for the development of these rain shelters. And as I have already mentioned, they have exceeded their useful life. A couple other things that are important for you to note is the size. So these are a wood construction. They're about just under 100 square feet, so they're pretty small, 11 feet by 11 feet if you were to measure it out to out. And the height of the structures themselves are a little bit more than 11 feet high. So they're compact and small. However, they cannot be retrofitted to meet ADA requirements. In order to be able to retrofit this, we would actually have to increase the size of these shelters probably about 30%. So the footprint, instead of being 11 foot by 11 foot, would increase significantly. And space is a very big consideration in the placement of these rain shelters, because we don't want to interfere with the game itself. Next slide. So where we started the project, we did not come up with a sketch. We were provided this sketch that had been vetted and presented by another design professional, AECOM, and they met with a few key stakeholders from the city. But from this sketch, we were asked to develop the design. And I'd like to explain a few things about this sketch. So as you can see in the design, there's actually, can I use a mouse? Great. There's a golf cart that goes through it. So the reality is that this design, which was a freehand sketch, was much, much bigger than the final design that you're going to be looking at tonight. This is about 3 times the size of what is actually the proposed design. A couple of other things that are noteworthy is the intent of the sketch, the materials with the oolitic stone covering the wall in the back is a material that is predominantly used in the city of Coral Gables. It's also referencing perhaps even a wood trellis. You can see by the thin, members here on the top with bougainvillea or something growing on top, which is also something that's referenced in Coral Gables at the entrances, even down the street from the golf course on Alhambra and Granada. Next slide. So in comparison to the existing wood shelters that you have now, you can see here the 11 foot by 11 foot versus almost 26 feet by 12 feet. So it's about double the size, yet it's still significantly smaller than the original sketch that was made. Next slide. So to address the question of compatibility and how does this design fit in to the Granada golf course, I would like to bring to your attention some of the references that are really right down the street. So this is the entrance in Alhambra and Granada. And as you can see here, the detailing of the wood members with the curve and the thin wood members, which are the trellis. These are the kinds of references that appeared in the sketch provided by AECOM. And even the tapering of the columns, you can see how these columns are not straight. So this is another reference from the AECOM sketch. And you see here how the bench is incorporated into the column. So it's kind of like the back of the bench becomes part of the structure that's holding up. So, and of course you have oolitic stone everywhere. This is at the entrance down by 8th Street in Granada. And of course the country club itself has oolitic stone throughout. And one other thing we wanted to reference was the use of color. So color is a very important aspect that we all enjoy about the architecture of Coral Gables. And so this is obviously from the Venetian pool, and so is this one. So what I think is beautiful about this is how it provides an accent color, yet it also blends very nicely into the landscape. That's one of the beautiful things that we have in Coral Gables. And this is a very tiny park directly across the street from this entry point on Alhambra. And I just wanted to point out how new parks are still utilizing oolitic stone and the incorporation of the benches. And these are things that I think make the design compatible. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. So these are the materials that we're utilizing are materials that are commonly found in the city of Coral Gables, including the Coral Gables pink, with the rock salt finish. You have that here in this building. Neutral colors of gray, which would be something that would have been used in the 1920s, kind of like the weathered feeling. We have materials that are going to weather nicely that would not require high maintenance. Actually, this wouldn't require any maintenance because the color would be integral into the construction. And of course, the oolitic stone and some pebbles, which I'll show you where that goes, and a couple of accent colors. So this brown is designed to be like a go away color. So it's intended to reference wood. So it has a kind of a warm gray wood tone to be able to blend away so that the vines and the flowers can be really the predominant feature in the shelter. And of course, one pop of color. Next slide. The location of the shelters, there are more shelters than what's being proposed to be built. This is a phase plan. So right now we're looking at 6 shelters. And just as a marker, this is where the pro shop is located and the clubhouse. And these are, of course, there's one shelter right next to the tennis courts and 3 more shelters towards the west and one over here. Thank you. Next slide. Not all of the shelters have water. So the ones that are receiving water are the ones that already had water. And that was part of the need to be mindful of the city's budget, available budget. Next slide. We have a short video. Do you press play or I play?
We're both using the same mouse.
Okay.
We like the video that much. We just wanted to show it again.
How about if we press enter?
Yeah, let's do this. There we go.
Okay, thank you. So the shelter is very transparent. And the idea here was the shelter is not the significant element here. Playing golf is what's important. So the idea was to be able to provide the least amount of structure possible so that the landscape itself is what's predominant. We really want it to disappear as much as possible, which is why we have very thin proportions for the roof, as thin as possible, and to really integrate the flowers and the landscape so that you can see mostly what you're feeling is the landscaping. So that was the idea behind keeping it transparent. On the issue of why isn't there more landscaping around like you have there now, that was also an issue that was debated with much seriousness, whether or not if landscaping similar to the hedges that you have there now would be beneficial. And it was recommended to not have it in order to be able to ensure that the police and security would be optimized. By having the hedges cover it up, it provides a place for hiding. So again, the reason why it's completely open is actually to allow for the maximum amount of security and visibility so that nobody can hide anywhere. Other things, I think that's it on the presentation. Yeah, another thing that we would like to mention is the water fountains are on the back side of the angled wall, the slanted wall, so that anybody who wants to come get some water can do so without interfering with the people that are sitting down. The purpose of the rain shelters is to provide protection for lightning. So the shelter itself, that is the reason why this project exists. We'll have the lightning rods, which are very small. They're like about 12 inches high, and probably will have a minimum of 2, perhaps 3 on top of the roof, but you don't even notice them. The ones that you have there now have them now. But what you have here is a design solution that addresses security, addresses the issue of ADA accessibility, that allows for someone to be able to come from their golf cart and transfer into a seat very safely, allows for someone to come and get water if needed. And of course, has been looked at and has been designed to be in compliance with the Secretary of Interior standards. Those standards are the highest level of design standards that an architect or a designer has to utilize to be able to ensure that the history and the the fabric of the city is not deteriorated. So this design is compatible in the use of materials, the scales, the colors, everything that I mentioned. At the same time, it is a reflection of something new, which is what the Secretary of Interior standards recommends. An intervention that is compatible, yet is of today.
Thank you. Thank you, Daphne.
Fred, I think there's a couple more slides for you.
So we're just, yeah, it's just a sum up of what was discussed and what the improvements would be. It's obviously demolition of the remaining shelters. We will preserve one, as I discussed, the Historic Preservation Board would like. The proposal of the 6 new shelters, the ADA access, the chilled drinking fountains. What we didn't mention there is the 4 that we're putting in, those are the ones that already had existing electric and water. If you don't have existing electric and water, obviously you can't have a water fountain. If you don't have existing electric, you can't have a chilled water fountain, which in South Florida kind of almost defeats the purpose. But so those are the areas that we have the ability to do that. So that's what we wanted to do. Next slide. So this is where we are in terms of the investment for the project that the 2 projects that we've discussed. You know, the first phase of the Pro Shop was the roof, which we did. We completed that project. It was a renovation of the roof. Then there's the Pro Shop renovation project, which is $850, and then the rain shelter project right now, which is $600,000 estimated with construction. What we do next is we review these designs as we're doing today. We keep looking at how to move forward, and then the design and construction documents, then permitting and bidding, and then we move to construction. So now we'll discuss the restaurant concept. I would like to call up Zeta Sardina. She is the asset manager and the property manager for the city, and she handles the restaurant lease.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Zeta Sardinas. Can you hear me?
The mic doesn't work, so you're gonna have to use your inner loud voice.
Okay, well, I can't speak as loud as Fred, but I will try. My name is Zeta Sardinas, and I'm the asset manager for the Economic Development Department. So as you've heard, the city is scheduled to carry out a renovation of both the interior and the exterior of the Pro Shop building. And the city is also going to carry out the construction of the rain shelters. In November of 2020, the Community Recreation Department held a community meeting where we discussed the renovation of the Pro Shop and the Pro Shop building and explained what we were doing there. And during that meeting, some of the residents inquired and suggested that we should also take a look at the renovation of the restaurant, and that should also take place, and it should be something the city will consider. At that time, the city was also considering whether we should, because of the substantial investment that we were making in redoing the building and in upgrading the level of the golf course itself with these improvements, that we would go ahead and look at that. This idea also coincided with the end of the current tenant's lease, which expires at the end of August of 2021. So in February of 2021, the city received an unsolicited proposal from an interested party who wants to lease and renovate the space. However, pursuant to the Division 12 of our procurement code, this week, the city began advertising the space as available for lease, and any interested prospective tenant may submit a proposal for leasing the property over the next 60 days. So for this iconic restaurant space, the city's looking for an experienced restaurateur with a chef-driven concept that's an economically viable. This is the existing slide that you've already seen. And then the next one, Carolina. So this is the renovation and what we're looking to do. So we're looking for an experienced restaurateur with a chef-driven, economically viable restaurant concept who will undertake a complete and interior and exterior renovation of the space bringing the existing space up to Florida Building Code standards and ADA standards. The interior renovation should include a full build out, new furniture and kitchen bar equipment, a new ADA compliant restroom, and a complete interceptor system overhaul. The exterior renovation should include new open air seating, additional landscaping, and seating shade structures that will complement the golf park area. So like I said before, with the refurbishment of the restaurant, the city is looking to not only complement the substantial investment that it's making in its upcoming pro shop renovation and rain shelter construction projects, but we also want to continue to ensure that exceptional food service and that enhanced interior and exterior dining experiences are provided to residents and visitors at the Granada Golf Course. And that's more or less, there's not a lot of more detail because we're waiting, we want to receive proposals and see what those are and what their vision is and what they want to do. So with that, and Fred, do you want to open up for questions or?
So just as a reminder, what we'll do is we'll take any commentary or questions in the room first, and then we'll direct those same comments and commentary to those attending virtually via Zoom. For those that are attending via Zoom, please inquire your questions through the Q&A chat. So if you are not familiar with Zoom, look for the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. It'll open a chat box and you may go ahead and enter your question or commentary there. We will go ahead and read that out loud and then direct it to the appropriate panel member or city representative to answer. So we're opening the floor for commentary.
Yes. Wherever you like, sir. Thank you.
If you want to be heard through the Zoom, it might be good to come a little closer because the audio is picking up through the laptop right now.
Okay, can they hear me?
I think they can, yes.
Okay. Seems like old times. Well, first I'd like to thank the city manager's office and the Parks and Recreation for putting this together at some of our requests. And we felt that we hadn't had a full chance to be heard on some of the issues that you heard talk about. And I would like to compliment the architects who have certainly improved on what we originally saw on the rain shelters, much better. However, I still have some issues. Let me lay a predicate about, and I'm Don Selesnik, by the way, a resident of 827 North Greenway Drive, First Fairway. So let me lay a predicate of why I feel like I have the right to have an opinion. First, as you heard, I've been a resident at 827, 1988, 1987, so 30 something years. And when I came back from the Army, I joined my father and a member of the 10th Bowlers Country Club in 1972. So I've been playing golf at Granada since 1972 and using the facilities. And I later became president of the 10th Bowlers and then president of the Country Club of Coral Gables. So what we've been looking at is not only very familiar to me, but near and dear to my heart and my whole family's heart. My children were raised at this location. And so when this subject started to come up, it certainly struck home with me and some of my fellow residents. And I know there's people in the room that have all kinds of different issues with different things here. I came to focus on marine shelters tonight, but certainly we'll take part in other discussions too. First of all, the historic nature of the shelter. I mean, the Historic Preservation Department and I have a long history, and I love historic preservation. I'm a former president of the Heritage Trust, former president of Florida Trust. But to declare that the only area of interest time-wise is from 1922 to 1939 is just, to me, I don't think. It's inexplicable because these are over 50 years old. And we know that one of the standards by the National Guard is 50 years or more. And they're what every one of us that are almost living, and my mother's 98, so she's still with us, but all of us who basically are living around the golf course know these rain shelters as are the ones that are currently there as our rain shelters. And they are the ones that we look at the golf course and we expect to see, and they are the ones that we know blend in and are part of our history, part of our history. So they are very important to us, whether they're about 1940 or 1950. They are, I know they've been there since before 1970. So they are important to us. And way in which they sit on the golf course, the way in which they look. And now I'm talking about a person who not only looks at them from the golf course side, but looks out my windows from my home, as many people, or some of the people in this room do also. So the historic nature, I think, is there. I think that they do qualify as historic and that they should be honored as such. The other thing is that although Husso and I, who's here tonight, walked and talked to some of our neighbors, and one of the constant comments that came up is that they blend in so well. They don't stand out. They are not markers of that stand out as something like the Country Club Prado entrance that we were shown, or the Venetian pool. They blend into the neighborhood, they blend into the background, they blend into the trees, and they blend into the ground shrubbery. And that's a really unique feature here, because this isn't a park, and it's not a pool, and it's not an entrance to the city. It is a polite, nice green space among a number of residential houses. And that is, I think, an important thing. They're simple, they're uncomplicated, and they blend in. The fact is that it's also a major expense for the city. So, I mean, before we do anything, you saw what the price was, $600,000 for 6 shelters or thereabouts. I'm not sure that includes the preliminary fees of the architects and planners and so forth, but it's a big deal. And so that's why the residents, or at least I speak for myself, not anybody else, I'm so concerned that we do the right thing, and we do the right thing for the course and for the people. And I would point out that as I looked at the new and better image, first of all, how many of you all know that we now live on the busiest streets in Coral Gables? We have joggers, we have baby carriages, we have bicyclists, we have skateboarders, we have walkers, we have cars, we have motorcycles, we have everything. And the way that which we configured the drinking fountains, I noticed, are an attraction to the people coming around the course, and actually will draw more people, I believe, because now we're supplying water facing outwards to the joggers and the walkers, and they're going to be coming into the area, which is very dangerous. We all know how dangerous it is to have civilians, we're all civilians, to have pedestrians onto the course near the golfers, which happens every day. And this is an encouragement to have more people come into the course, I believe. And I really want you to know I'm an attorney, but I do not practice in ADA area. But I have been told by some of my neighbors that we have an attorney that will opine that these golf range shelters do not need to be ADA compliant unless they have some facilities in them. And I will leave that up to the experts, but we certainly would like to have that looked into more before we say that that's the reason we have to do this. And lastly, for my comments, is that we did have a meeting back in 2014, which someone called to my attention because I appeared there, which we talked in general about the AECOM design of the course. At that time, the biggest discussion was the proposed jogging path around the outside the course, with a 6-foot hedge between the jogging path and the golf course, thereby cutting off all of our views of the golf course, which is an idea that was dropped, thank heavens. At least I think it's dropped. It's not coming back. Maybe I should have been dropped. But at that meeting, and I'm going to quote the Herald Reporter, but so I don't know that she gets it all exactly right. But it says some of the none, here's what was printed in the paper after none of the historical monuments would be modified, and the existing conditions of all the facilities would remain in place. Well, I can only think of like 3 historic monuments or existing facilities. I mean, that would be historic besides the clubhouse building, which, as you know, came later. And that was the marker on the first tee. That was a historic marker about the golf course history, which is gone. The Community Foundation bench honoring Doc L. Smith, which is gone. And now the rain shelters, which we are proposing to be gone. So I would say to you that, Peter, I'd love us to look into where the bench is and putting the marker back up, but also we don't have a name for any of our group, but we'd like to save the shelters as they are.
You have to stay with me. Can I have a little rebuttal, if you don't mind? Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. So it was a pleasure. Thank you for everyone coming today. I realize that we think that the rain shelters are historic. We have a very, very strong historic board, and they have determined that the shelters are not historic. And And so what they have suggested is that we keep one shelter, and then replace the others. Now, we just because something is 50 years old doesn't mean it's historic. There has to be some merit in that, and so our very strong historical board determined that they were not. So we've also looked at the size of these shelters. The original shelter, as you saw in that original drawing, was quite large. These shelters are quite small, and we did that aerial view and that movie so that you all could see, because it's difficult to see on a plan in 2 dimensions what the shelters actually look like. And so we took that aerial photograph, put a drone up, we looked at that at the golf course. And you realize where those shelters are, they're not significant. However, what they are is they're period sensitive to the pro shop. The period sensitive to the pro shop, they were taken also to our board of architects. Our board of architects looked at the rain shelters and found that design, looked at various designs, and found that design was what they felt was appropriate for the golf course. Those are modern. They're made out of concrete. They're small, very low maintenance, and really, I think if you no offense, Mayor, but I think the ones that we have now are a little bit ugly. But we can keep one, and so this has been taken to the board of architects. This has been taken to the historical board, and we feel that the new shelter is much smaller, and really the locations where those shelters are really are not locations where most people traveling along the path of the golf course are really going to use them. So there's my rebuttal. And I would like to.
I appreciate it, and this reminds me of the case I used to be in. But let me comment a couple of things. One is that yes, we've had over the past several decades, about 4 decades, 5 decades, a very strong historic preservation board. However, in recent years, there has been a lot of controversy over the board's decisions and whether or not that they are preserved in the city as we see it to be preserved. And so therefore, yes, I believe in preservation, I believe in the board, but I'm not sure that I believe in this board or their decisions in total. And if it's not historic, then why keep one? I mean, take it down. And I know that you were trying to keep one.
Well, let me throw you some statistics about that. Our current board has approved over 90%. I think don't quote me on number, I think it's 94% of the projects that are taken to the historical board. Not everything is historical, but their approval rate from what staff recommends is about 94%. So it's a substantial. I know that people think that this board is not working. I don't understand why, because they're working very well with our historical department. We have a new historical director who was a historical director in the UK, working on 1,000-year-old castles. And so we found a very strong, very passionate historical director who was trained in Europe, trained in construction, and did a master's degree in preservation, and has worked with very 1,000-year-old structures in the UK. So just to
I know, and I think that's wonderful. But I just wanted to say that remember when you quote the figure that they approved 90% of the department's recommendations, you've already said that the department recommended these. So all of their approvals are not necessarily in favor of historic preservation. They are in favor of what the department recommends. And in this case, I think the department poorly recommended. That's all. I think, can I ask you one question?
Yes, of course, man.
On the clubhouse. Can I ask one question on the design of the clubhouse? I look out and I see what the clubhouse looks now, and I know that it has that raised shaped roof. But when you look at that image, it looks like it's being further exaggerated. I just hope that that's not.
No, it's not.
I mean, look at the image. It looks like it's a gigantic sail.
No,
The
that
only
roof is,
exterior that's changing is the storefront windows. The
Okay.
exterior is gonna stay exactly
okay,
the same.
it's been removed already, it's been removed already, so the issue that we want to put impact glass, we don't have, we have, when hurricane is, there's 48 hours for a hurricane watch, and then there's 24 hours for hurricane warning. It's very, very difficult for us to be able to shutter everything, and so we are moving to impact glass to make sure that we can save our structures. We're looking at our new public safety code, that impact glass is strong as a concrete block. And so that's what we're doing, but the actual roof, it's been removed, so it stays as it is.
Okay, see. And we'll get in contact with you for that pension, that marker, so we get some more information, because there's 20, when Sarah 2014, I should know, but I'm stopped. I don't know.
My name is Genevieve Orr. I am a lifetime resident here at Coral Gables. I grew up on North Greenway Drive.
Can I ask you just to step up here so we can capture your audio? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Thank you, Stephanie.
What,
Right
behind
there's
here?
fine. No, right there's
Okay.
perfect. Thank you.
I grew up on North Greenway Drive, and that's my front yard, actually. So I still have a very passionate about it. And I live now a block behind it, on Navarre. A couple things that are complex, or a little bit odd, is that you said that these are going to be smaller, but someone else said that they're actually double the square footage. So that's like having not 6 shelters, but it's like having 12, equivalent to 12 shelters, according to the presentation. Did you know?
So basically what was proposed, the original proposal, the original drawing that was shown from AECOM was much larger in size. Our current architect of record, Guri Matute, they reduced the size. It's still a little bit larger than what you have right now, but within the existing footprint, we're also reducing. So originally there was 9 shelters total.
Right.
We're gonna go ahead and do 6 of those shelters.
But
That's
you
the
were
proposal.
showing us, why didn't you show us something that was in scale to what you're proposing? I have a real problem with that, especially after Miracle Mile. Debacle.
But it is in scale. The original proposal from ACOM was much larger. And this proposal has been reduced quite a bit.
You said that they were 11 by 11 currently.
Yes,
Yeah,
I'll-
show
I'll-
this,
I'll-
show the
I'll-
thing. Another thing I'd like to also say while you're finding that is that, yes, we are a very pro historic preservation here, but we are also a themed city. A themed city means that there's a theme here that was built around, that George Merrick was passionate about, to have Mediterranean style architecture. Not just the materials, but the architecture. And I think that that's where you're kind of missing, quite frankly. And this is only one or two of my issues here, but I've got like about 12, and I'm not going to give them all to you.
Well, let's take a look at the rain shelter that we have now. It's really not a rain shelter. Look at the bottom typical elevation. That is not Mediterranean architecture, right? This one-
No, but I'm saying if
okay.
you were building it,
Okay, that is actually quite, honestly, it's a cheap structure. As an engineer, I can tell you that it's a cheap structure. If we look at the proposed rain shelter on the picture, that's certainly more in line. Now, to do our board of architects and historical board looked at this and found that to do Mediterranean with that clubhouse, there's an incompatibility there. And so when you have the board of architects, which are 8 practicing architects, look at that and say that this is really much more appropriate design, because if it's, let's take a look at the we can shift over to the,
I can actually
Sure.
zoom in. You want to zoom in here?
no, I want to see the
But look at-
rendering.
Okay.
but look at the dimensions here.
If I may,
25, almost
No,
26 feet
No,
by
that's very,
12 feet.
that's very deceiving because.
Well, that's why I'm here.
I understand, but if you see that the roof itself, the roof itself is much smaller. What extends outward is that stone right there, that stone. But if you take that out,
Yeah.
it is that dimension goes back to about 18 feet, something like that, right?
Yeah.
Now, let's look at the
This is-
rendering.
this-
Let's look at the
yeah,
rendering. Because that is, and let's go back to the ACOM, because
okay.
I think I know where you're coming from, so I just want to clarify that. Let's go back, that's the ACOM, the original ACOM design. That is huge. Look at the space that you can put four golf carts. You can put 4 golf carts in there. Okay, that's not what we're doing. That was the design that was shown originally. That's out of the question. That's a huge structure. Let's go back to the original. Let's go back to the rendering of what we're proposing now. That is the typical elevation, right?
Yep.
Which
I'm gonna go to the graphic. Is that what you?
Let's go to the last slide of the presentation.
I'm sorry, Mayor, but a core bear may not be the one you want to keep.
Yeah. But this is-
There we go. Here you go, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is much smaller. You can see that you can only fit one. You can't fit 4 in there like you had on the other. You can only fit 1. So it's a much smaller structure. It's stone. You can look through it, and it's certainly not anything like what was presented before. What presented before was triple that size. And that roof is much smaller because the dimension that the architect put extends it to that rock
bench,
where the
to the
gentleman
bench.
is at the
Yeah,
very
the
end.
26 feet goes up to this point.
Right, so that's really just a rock seat going there.
My last concern that hasn't been already addressed, though, is the seating. So thank you for saying that. We have a little bit of a problem sometimes at nighttime on Granada Golf Course. It's something that nobody really likes to talk to, but sometimes we have visitors sleeping in these little huts. It's not a pretty thought to think of, but they do. When you have these big benches, that's like a hotel for them.
That bench will have vertical separators,
Okay.
so that can happen.
Draw them in
Which
in the
is
next
not-
rendering.
That's a
Right,
great point.
right, which is not
Mhm.
shown there, but that bench, which is a very good point, will have,
Yep.
and we've discussed it internally,
Mhm, mhm.
will have vertical separators, so that bench cannot
Yep.
be able to be used.
This one too.
Yes,
We'll do
that's
something there as well. It's a
That's-
very good point.
But that long bench is most of it is uncovered, and it's a very nice architectural feature, and it's not bad. But that's stone, that's very. That is a perspective. Go back to, yeah, that,
Would you like me to show the video one more time?
Yes,
It gives you a
absolutely.
better dimensional perspective.
and we did the video to give you a better 3D presentation, 3D look at what it really
Please
is.
when it wants and not when it wants.
Yes, it does. It looks bigger, but it's a perspective. It's not the, I think you'll see it better. So if you look at the aerial, it shows where they're located. So they're located in exterior areas. And
Give me 1 second.
by the way, I hope you like our new public safety building. It's the new meeting room, and it extends all the way back. And hopefully, we're doing the new parking garage next door.
Yeah, it's a good angle.
You see how the fence was shoots out?
We'll put barriers on them. So it's similar to prevent skaters skating from the rock benches. There'll be barriers put in place, both in the long one and the
Yes,
short
we're
one.
gonna put separators on the bench and separators on that, because we also don't want that, and don't want people with skateboards. But as you can see, there's only one golf cart that fits there. The one that was proposed before was quite large. It was probably 3 or 4 times.
So we have a gentleman raising his hand, and I want to thank you guys. You've been so courteous. Everybody's been raising your hand, so we really appreciate that.
I just had a simple question, and it is, that looks like the giant airfoil. What has that been? To this thing? That doesn't look like.
So that will stand, that will be done for the floor building code, and that will withstand the hurricane.
What kind of?
It will withstand the floor building code requires you to design to 176 miles. And that will be designed for the new city.
What's the roof made of?
Concrete.
That's why you're putting the windows on the roof.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for coming on. That way everybody can hear you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mr. City Manager. My name is Wally Amundsen, a 30-year resident, 1214 Cortez. And I see the golf course a lot. I do 15 miles a day on the bicycle. And Mr. Iglesias, I would like to commend the whole staff. The way this meeting began, it was very encouraging. What was said was, we have plans as a city, and we stopped to ask the community what they would like. And we listened. And for me, the points went up very quickly, because that is a key for working between citizens and administration. What I'm starting to see now is that we're trying to defend our opinions and what we think is best. So I would recommend that we use the same approach that was used months ago when we had a similar forum and there was more input, and then we came together and talked about that. That seems to me a better way of consensus. So rather than seeing people just trying to urge their point, let's listen and let's take time. These small shelters, my question would be, how many people have actually ducked into a shelter in the last 30 days? I never see anyone there. Maybe we could find out. Of course, it is a good idea to have a place to get out of the rain that's safe. But to create a path for people to get a drink, I'm on a bicycle, so I didn't bring my water. I'm going to cross into the golf course and get a drink. That is a very serious observation. And I think that this whole thing can go slower with lots more input rather than trying to defend this design or that design and hurry and press to get moving rather than look at the consensus. There is not a whole lot of consensus. So you don't really want to make the city look like there's two sides here. So I would say that for every one person that's here, there's probably 20 people with that same opinion. That's my comment.
Just to answer your question, we've been listening. We've made this shelter 1/3 the size of the prior shelter. We're trying to get a project done, and we're trying to do what we feel is good for the city. People talk about projects not happening. Well, we have to have some consensus in order to do a project. And if we talk for years and years, nothing ever gets done. This building will not have gotten done. So there comes a time when you have to make a decision, right? You can't talk forever. And so we did listen. We looked at the other one, it was way too big. We made this one instead of 4 carts, it's 1 cart. And we're here to show you what we think is something that went to the Board of Architects, went through the historical board, we listened to you and made it much, much smaller. But we could talk forever and never get a project done. And that is not, I like to get things done, and I like to get things done for the residents. Of course, I'm a 40-year resident of the city. So I want to have consensus. we can never have 100% consensus. Nobody has 100% consensus. It's not possible, right? But I'd like to get a majority consensus so we can do something. So we did listen. We are back, right? We have listened. We are back. And we've come with something that has approval by 8 architects, which is the Board of Architects, our historical board. And so we could talk forever and never get anything done. But there comes a time that we have to decide whether we do the project or we don't do the project. And that's what this is about.
If I may,
I will make that decision because we can't work on a small project for 5 years. It just doesn't make sense, right? So we're trying to come back to you with having listened and having made a project there's not 4, you have a project that went from 4 carts to 1 cart. It's a much smaller project. I think much more obscure project. Can you get 100% consensus? Is everybody going to think perfectly? That never happens because there's no way. But I would like to, if people do not want it, then and you want to keep those wood structures, you feel that's nicer than that, so be it. But I'm sorry, I just don't see that. I'm an engineer. I don't. The one is this is a structure that can last for 75 years. The others are wood structures that are inexpensive structures. Mayor, I'm sorry, but I'm an engineer, you're a lawyer, so I look at things differently. But that's what we have. And what we're here is to get that consensus and that input.
Can I make?
yeah, of course.
And sir, you can make any comment more. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If I could just make one more comment. I've noticed that the project has 3 components. What about the suggestion of starting with something that has full consensus, that the shelters be number 3 and work on it in stages? Then the community can come together.
And by the way, the community don't want lighting, so we're putting no lighting on this. Because you all did not want lighting. So we make sure that we made them much smaller, did not provide lighting. If the water becomes an issue, we can take out the water. I mean, that's not an issue. So we have listened. And what we're trying to do is really get to a point where we can do something. If you all do not want it, then it's fine. We can rebuild what you have there.
In response to the drinking water fountains, I wanted to clarify, we did the research to the infrastructure that was in place. The reason there's plumbing right now existing is that they originally did have water stations there that had gone out of service, they had been capped, and they had been removed. That's the only reason why we had to reintroduce them at those specific locations. Also, if you've walked through the course or used the course recently, you'll find that there are water coolers set up throughout the course specifically for the golfers to use. So water was asked to be provided by the golfers. But like Mr. City Manager said, if that's something that we should take into consideration, we can absolutely do that. I just wanted to make sure you guys are aware of the history of the existing shelters, that they did have water access originally.
But I think the issue was, the biggest issue was the size, that they were like 3 times, 4 times the size of this one. The issue was lighting, that we did not want to attract anyone to these areas, and the size has been reduced incredibly, and no lighting will be on any of them. Yes.
One question, and I agree totally with Don's comments, but have you gotten any kind of response from the greenways? Because I'll tell you right now, everyone that we have spoken to is against this concept. This belongs down to Kendall Lakes, not in Granada Golf Course. So I don't know when you talk about consensus, but certainly not those of us that live on the greenways. I've spent 40 years between South Greenway and North Greenway. So this is my neighborhood. This is where, I've spent the last 40 years. And this has no semblance of what the Granada Golf Course is about. And what's there now, we're not saying to keep them. We're saying you could renovate, you could put them up, but have them look more like what they are historically. And I don't understand. I live in a historical home, and it became historical once it became over 50 years. And I played all kind of problems when I renovated that house, because the Board of Architects and the historical board told me what kind of roof, what kind of door, what kind of shutters, what kind of everything. But something that's been there for well over 50 years is not historical.
Well,
That doesn't make any sense.
That, the 50 years is not historical. 50 years is one of the issues to make something historical. But there are many homes that are over 50 years old in Coral Gables that are non-historical. Not every home in Coral Gables is over 50 years old. Is
I
historical.
understand that.
Not everything is over 50
But
years.
those certainly fall into the category
Well,
of being historical.
Well, I would say that certainly I respect your opinion, or the historical board does not believe in it. Okay, so that's, I respect your opinion on that. However, not every home that's over 50 years old is historical.
I'll ask
Some
the same
qualify for that
question
and some
again,
do not.
How many of the Greenway residents agree with what's going on?
Well, that's what we're doing.
Okay.
That's what we do.
Well, because Don and I walk blocks after blocks.
So
and talk to people,
if you
nobody
prefer the
agrees.
original ones, then we will rebuild the original ones. I really don't have an issue. I think that we're here and I'm here really to show you what we've done. Because we have listened, we made it a lot smaller. We've taken out the lighting. We're putting those issues on the benches so they cannot be used for sleeping. And so we have listened. If the consensus is, and you know, and you have your opinion, you need to look at see what the consensus is. But please understand, that 50 years old does not mean that it's historical. Historical has to be historical significance. Our historical board and our historical directors look at historical significance, not just age. Age is one criteria of numerous criteria.
So what's the purpose of preserving the one?
They,
I mean,
well, you may want to preserve one. So, you know, there might be some things that you want to preserve one, but there might be some things that you want to preserve every single one of them, right? And so if you have so if you have a big house, you probably want to preserve them all. You have a house by not a prominent architect, there might be one. So
with all
so
due
you have to-
respect, what you're telling me is you all are gonna do what you wanna do, and it doesn't matter what the residents have.
that's not true.
If I may, Mr. City Manager, the reason why one came up, it was a recommendation from one of the members of the community at the Historic Preservation Board, and it was adopted by the board. And I personally, I feel very strongly in favor of that as well. The city doesn't have a budget for that, but that's another issue. But I do feel that preserving a collective memory is very important. I personally grew up on Alana Street. I went to Coral Gables Elementary, Harvard, graduated from Coral Gables Senior High, married in the Church of Little Flower. My kids went to St. Teresa, and I'm very familiar with the golf course, and I share that sentiment of the collective memory. I really do. So, provided that a budget would be established for it, I think that's where the city was at. Now, I, as an architect, I'm curious to know if, from the perspective of what you have here, if you want to eliminate this entirely and go back to wood, or if there's something that can, the comments of what you're suggesting can be incorporated, that's also something that we want to hear.
And I remind you, I heard some people saying, asking for a vote. Let's get all the commentary first. And we also have to be respectful of those who attended virtually. So I don't want to forget about those comments as well. So we'll finish the commentary here. Please raise your hand if you have more comments or questions, and then we'll go virtually. Yes, you had a comment back, sir? Yes.
My name is Jacob Hale. I live at 803 Greenway. I just had a quick question in regards to the lighting and security. Maybe I'm looking at it counterintuitively, but wouldn't lighting actually provide for more security because the space is lit up at night? You're not going to have someone camping there, and police can see them. And so, thinking about sort of what the term, crime prevention through environmental design. One of the first items would be LED lighting and putting as many eyes on spaces like these instead of actually making them dark. So at night, people can just sleep there or camp there. And it's a question.
And
I know it's difficult.
that is a very good question, but I think the consensus was to not have lighting. We've got enough ambient lighting there that maybe that can work. Certainly is something we can add if it becomes an issue.
But I think lighting draws people, so it closes, and so there's no light, it's a residential district, so
The idea is to discourage people from lingering. That's why we're seeing.
And that was a commentary, that was a commentary we heard when we did this presentation first. No lighting, so, you know, in that. respect, we asked- Yeah, no, no, I'm just- I'm just explaining why we.
What about security cameras? Has that been given a thought?
So security cameras, like our director had mentioned earlier, phased. The initial phase was predominantly to focus on the pro shop, both interior and exterior. There's obviously a lot of low voltage infrastructure that needs to be built up, so that's something that can be phased later on. It wasn't budgeted as part of this comprehensive project.
We're hopeful that as technology gets better throughout the years, there won't be so much infrastructure to be, more wireless camera.
You can just do it with Wi-Fi, you can do a solar camera, it costs $300 a pop.
You can, but it's hooking it up through security. We looked at it, we'll continue to look at it.
I'm just-
It definitely will be phased in later
I
on.
applaud you guys for trying to make change. I know it's not easy, everyone has an opinion.
Yes. My concern is that concrete bench is awfully large, or it looks long. I don't know how large it is. But it invites people to gather there
Mhm.
after the, well, after the golf is on home and it's still light out.
So it definitely, with the architects, they can look at reducing the size, but I want to make clear, and we mentioned it earlier, is we will place barriers so that people aren't encouraged to lie down on them. They're supposed to just provide a resting space, especially for walking players. Not everybody's on a cart, and it allows them to rest, it allows them to cover a shade. So that was
Basically
why,
shading.
yes.
Yes, but
But
not.
there will be separators on the bench, and we'll do something similar also for skateboarders that tend to be stored.
And how long is that bench?
I can go back to the rendering.
How long is the bench? We have the architects.
It's not long at all. It's like 8 feet.
8 to 9 feet?
Yes.
That's pretty long. That can invite a lot of people to come and sit there, and I know because I see them there all the time.
I think that bench, we can maybe have that bench reduced somewhat if you feel that's too long.
If you look at
The top.
existing,
The top.
the existing shelter, you look at the amount of bench for people to sit. It's pretty much the same amount of linear places for people to sit. This is just the rectilinear. Look at the amount of seating area. Actually, I would have less people to sit. Just because it's rectilinear and it's not on a diagonal shape, probably that's the perception. That it's a lot shorter in the bench than the existing one. And in
I
terms
mean,
of
it can probably be reduced slightly, but not much.
yeah. Plus, the only reason it was part of one of the elements in the original design that was recommended.
Yes.
That's why it's there.
We have another commentary over here. Go ahead. You go ahead.
And I was on the preservation board for 8 years. Mayor Stolten's appointment, I was chairman for 1 year. And yes, you're right, not everything 50 years old is historic. 50 years is a benchmark. Nova Scotia, in Canada. And when we travel up there, they want to come down here and travel. And where's the first place they want to go to is Burger Bob's. So she covered beautifully the local. It's in our hearts. This is our family. He's our family. They're our family. But when you talk to people outside of our family, far away, they know Burger Bob's. And if you want to take the heart out of the local people, you destroy traditions. If you want to take the heart out of the world's perception of Coral Gables, you take away their traditions. Leave our traditions alone. He's our tradition, she's our tradition. Our family was born, Rita's family was born in Coral Gables. These are our traditions. If you take everything away, you're starting it all over again, and the traditions die. I just ask that you consider seriously, Burger Bob's is a tradition. It's local and it's international. And not many people have been able to accomplish that in life. Bob McGuire did.
And I just want to apologize to those who joined us on Zoom. For some reason, we lost audio, so they missed some of the spoken words that were said. We're back on, and they should be hearing us okay. And we had another commentary. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, there has to be a way to save Bob. The city, it seems like they had already made up their mind and really didn't give the community an opportunity to comment before they terminated the lease. It's just wrong. And there has to be a way the city can work with Bob's and keep it there.
I think before we respond, I feel very bad for everybody who's been so patient online. If it's okay, we'll take those commentary, and then we can always turn it back to the floor, and then we can respond to the secondary topic that has just come up with Burger Bob's. So if you bear with me, you know, they have been so patient. This one's done. All right, so the first inquiry was, did the city present the design of the rain shelters to the Board of Architects for approval? If not, why not? So some of these answers may have already, or questions may already have been answered. We'll go ahead, go through those again, just in case they were missed. So of our committee, who would like to answer this question?
Yeah, so they went to the Board of Architects and were approved by the Board of Architects.
And this was an anonymous attendee, so I'm not sure. If you have any additional questions to the response, please feel free to add them in the chat. Okay. The next one is, we cannot hear the speakers. We fixed that. We apologize. Okay. At the last meeting, the city acknowledged that the design was not approved by the Board of Architects. If it was, please tell us on what date and the names of the BOA members who reviewed and approved this design. Yes, the rain shelters. So I think this might be something we may have to get back to unless we have a list of the board members available.
Carolina, we don't have that information here. We can provide it. However, the compromise with the Board of Architects was to go back once the plans are further developed.
Okay.
They were approved.
It was approved administratively.
So the plans were, the initial plans were approved administratively, and like, excuse me?
Preliminary approval.
So we received preliminary approval from the Board of Architects. Like Jose Olivero mentioned, who is responsible for the CIP projects, that it's going to go back again if we were to pursue these plans and go through the permit process.
June 2020.
So originally they were approved in June of 2020. And again, we can provide additional information if anybody would like additional information on the members of the BOA who reviewed and approved this design. The next question is from Betsy Tillman at 918 South Greenway. This may be a little modern and big change. Could I suggest to make the big slab less long and paint the circular column dark brown like wood and the structure would look less obvious. Any commentary from the architects? No? Okay, so we'll take those considerations. The next commentary is from Corelia Carbonell. At least one of the original shelters needs to be preserved as per the Historic Preservation Board and kept. In capital letters, do not discard. The best ones should be moved to another green space. And the city does agree with that decision. Again, from Corelia Carbonell, better yet, why not renovate the original ones? Again, why are the residents' opinions being discarded?
Response. Many of these have been demolished already, so they don't exist.
And not so much demolished, they have fallen in on themselves. So it's important to note that structurally they have collapsed or were at the point of collapse. That's why they were, taken down. That's why there's no longer currently 9 in place.
So it's not a renovation. If anything, it would be reconstruction of the ones that don't exist anymore.
So this would not just be a renovation, this is a reconstruction of those existing ones. Again, from Corelia Carbonell, why is the city spending lots of money on new designs when they could follow a green strategy and restore and repurpose the historical 1940s shelters that for 80 years have complemented the landmark golf course? Residents love them. They have a nostalgic effect. She referenced Brooklyn's Prospect Park repurposed, restored its vintage shelters. Why can't the city why can't the city begin to think green, adopt sustainability initiatives should be exercised? This was a commentary on the presentation. Okay. So before we continue with the online responses, we have a request in the room okay. All right, the rendering of the east elevation and the overhead of the pro shop during the discussion of the restaurant depicts an extensive outdoor seating area with tables, umbrellas, etc. It shows only a very narrow strip between the putative outdoor dining facility and the beginning of the tea area of the first, says hotel, but I think that's a typo. It appears to all but eliminate the area where carts are typically parked from the opening in the morning to closing of the course in the evening. So this is the question on the proposal of the restaurant space. The outdoor restaurant space, there was a commentary on the extensive space used for the dining area and what would happen to the golf carts that are normally parked there.
Any space that's there, that is just a concept. We have to make sure that we have the necessary golf carts because it is operable as a golf course first and foremost. So we would work on fitting the golf carts. There's a lot of space there. If there's some planters that take up a lot of room at this point that they're not necessarily there, there's enough room for the golf carts. But yes, the golf carts is a golf course first and foremost.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
You're planning on putting outdoor dining along with the illegal outdoor dining that's going on at Liberty Cafe now? In the middle of a residential area?
I think the response was it wasn't planned, it was just identified as a potential space that may be utilized.
Sir, I would like to know what's wrong with Liberty Cafe. I think it's the best amenity of the entire community. I think it's tripling our own values.
Excuse me. There was a city commission vote that they can't do what they're doing, and they're doing it. And during COVID, we didn't complain. But if you live around anywhere in the immediate vicinity and look at the parking, I don't guess it's still here. But we have a parking issue up and down North Greenway, not quite to your house, but all the way to the first 4 or 5 houses. And it is exasperated by the complete outdoor dining. Liberty Cafe is fine, and they always had certain outdoor options of benches or anything. But now they've cleared the entire space and they have tables and so forth. And it's the bikers hang out on Saturday morning. Now we get the whole biking peloton, or whatever they call it,
changing from a standpoint of home values and walkability and urban suburban. And I think being aware of the fact that there is a need for a change and that the city manager is trying to communicate to all of us, it's just important to keep that in consideration. I feel like, you know, I'm probably the only younger person in this room. I'm probably the only person in their 30s. I very much want to respect the history and the legacy. And for example, I think the restaurant should remain Bird Box forever from the standpoint of the name. But I just think we should be open to certain changes. And there seems to be a lot of pushback, you know, overall. And with that, I am thinking nothing's going to change. And I don't know if that's good. Maybe that's the best outcome. I don't know. But I would just encourage everyone to think about not only being negative, but also trying to applaud the effort to improve our neighborhood. And maybe I'm looking at it from a completely wrong perspective. I don't mean to offend anyone.
Just can't make you think we're older.
No, and by the way, I couldn't be more honored to be in a room where we're debating an issue of our own community and everyone is respectful and thoughtful. And I couldn't be more grateful. I'm just trying to bring in an element of, you know, and I know home values, it's not all what matters, but I think that if, you know, the little clubhouse area and even whatever they're doing, if it's illegal, then we need to fix it. But from a standpoint of the benefit that we're all receiving as homeowners and the impact on our home values, walkability and all that stuff, I think that's great, you know? And I don't sense that in the room. So, but for whatever it's worth, maybe I shouldn't be speaking. I'm learning to momentum and maybe I'm not supposed to be.
Every voice here is respected and valued. So it's very important. I'll go back, if I may, to those who have been very patient online. The next commentary is, I appreciate that the current project architect states that they were tasked with working off an original sketch from ACOM, but why are we limited by that original sketch, especially when that sketch, specifically the roof line or roof supports, does not harmonize with the period of significance of the surrounding neighborhood or Merrick's vision? I think I'll turn that over to the architect. No? Is there commentary back?
I think that's more of a procedural.
Okay. Yeah.
That sketch came out of working through the city staff that was involved in the architecture of it, which was the Historic Preservation Department, the city architect, and the planning department. And that was the design that came out of those three departments working together, and architecture in the city.
And going back to original commentary, the original designs were much larger in scale. So when it was turned over to the second group of architects that were on board with this project, they've reduced that scale down. Next commentary is, they also have club bags banned the rest of the paraphernalia they drag along when not in an actual cart. Someone needs to go out and watch what really happens. Those spaces allocations appear unrealistic and likely may affect the utility of the area to the restaurant and indirectly its profitability. So I think the commentary was in regards to the shelters and actually watching closer as to how they're being used currently and carrying clubs and bags when they're coming into the shelters and incorporating that in the design. That's how I'm understanding this comment. Okay. The following comment was about the Zoom not working. We apologize that we lost connection. An administrative approval is different than an approval by the Board of Architects in a public hearing, correct? And I'll turn this over to the administration.
The Board of Architects meets every Thursday, and it's open to the public.
I think the question referred to why was this design approved administratively?
The design was approved by the Board of Architects.
It was during the time of COVID, and there were no meetings held at the city. However, the city architect and the Historic Preservation Board, everything was already scheduled. And part of the procedures of the city architect has the authority to act on behalf of the Board of Architects. And I believe that he consulted with
The city architect, because of COVID, consulted with the.
There
with
were
the
no-
board of architects.
there was no actual formal meeting.
Correct. And so, but they consulted with the board of architects.
Yes,
To make sure that they were concurrent with his.
he did.
Because of COVID.
Carlos Mindro was at the time city architect. And he's the one who actually approved it.
And we did that procedure because of COVID, because we could meet directly, so we would consult on all the major projects with the city architects.
And
I'm
happened.
sure and that was done only during COVID. We're back to normal meetings.
That was in between May and June.
We kept the city open, kept everything open, but through hybrid meetings and things like this. But that was to keep the board of architects open and keep construction. Moving.
Who is the city architect now?
We have another city architect that Carlos will be retired. So our city architect, his name is Juan.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Juan Riesco.
Juan Diaz.
And I think it's important to note that if this were to pursue construction drawings permits, they would return back to the board now that the board regularly meets again. I have,
Carlos Mindru retired.
Carlos Mindru retired. Yeah. But I just don't know.
And Juan Diaz took over. He was a former member of the board of architects and did a very good job, and now he's our city architect.
Some say Carlos was pushed out.
Don't do what?
Some say Carlos was pushed out.
No. Actually, we asked him to stay a little bit longer until we found somebody else, and that is not true.
It's not always true.
so I think I have 3 more comments. I'm a relatively new resident of the Gables, living on Coral Way. I've had many opportunities to stop by Bob's and enjoy his fine food, and more importantly, the camaraderie that exists. We're all talking about history, and I would submit, I think Bob has certainly become a part of the Gables history, and we should work with Bob for him to be able to continue. And I have a request, so if anybody else comes up to speak, the request is to please come up so they can hear everybody speaking. The last comment I have, now that the city has resumed public meetings before the Board of Architects, why doesn't the city resubmit the current design now, especially given all the opposition from the residents?
It's a good segue into, as we start to look at coming to some consensus and wrap up on the shelters. Usually what we do in a community meeting is we have a vote as to, you know, whether they want us to continue on this path, whether they want us to look at something else. And in this case, obviously, you know, we read the room, we listen. I know somebody said we weren't, but we really are. This is why we're here. You know, we did get some good feedback from, you know, the golfers and other people in the community, but we realize the value of people that live closest to it. So that's why we're here. In terms of the shelters, is there anything in its current design that can be modified that would be something that would be of satisfaction to that neighborhood? Or is the flat roof just, you know, all right?
I've been feeding my car money so I can keep parking.
Sorry.
But on the way, there are these beautiful blue-light benches all the way along outside. Why are you using concrete? Why aren't you doing what they're doing all along the outside? These nice, big rectangular benches, that could be beautiful, and that's totally in harmony with Coral Gables. And some of them are coral, but the big square ones are, I think we should get rid of the point.
It's a good suggestion. Concrete's ugly. Well, let it line. We have both.
Well, you should do it all at once. And they're exactly like the bench out front of the pro shop.
I've heard already complaints about the amount of money that the city is spending on the shelters. we used a bench made out of woolite, such as, this is the public building, this is the headquarters of the city. So it merits such an expense because it's owned by those shelters have a certain budget, so we're already stretching the
We'll look
budget.
at it, absolutely.
But that's why we didn't use that.
With that input, something that could be considered to alleviate the budget is maybe we don't build all 6. We reduce the amount of shelters and then look at incorporating some of more of the higher end features and amenities that the community wishes.
I agree with Coral Gables, they should have higher
Yeah, a couple of points. First, have you made a study? Is there a need for all 6? So that's the first point. My house overlooks green, and I don't see them used. Maybe I'm not looking at the same time, but they are at the right time during rainstorms or thunderstorms. So that's the first point. Second, I understand how the architecture, I'm an ex-architect, used to be an architect, how the architecture kind of ties into the clubhouse architecture. If there's a way to make the shelters less conducive to congregation and less appealing to people attracted to going there and congregating there, and like the long slab, I understand the architectural value of it, but it's almost too inviting.
I think with the core rock, it'll help because if you've sat on one of those boulders out there, they're not very comfortable to sit on for a long period of
But
time.
in terms of the congregation, it's an interesting point you make. If you keep that same shape that we have there now, and it's refurbished, and it looks, does that become a congregation point? I don't know. Because now it's circled in, you have the pitch, it's even safer, and it's even, what I'm worried about is, and we talked about it is, because I look at it from an operational standpoint also at night, making sure that safety and security. So I don't know the answer, but you do bring up a good point. So we're here to get all the input, and, we can go back to the drawing board. I know that staff might not want to hear that, and if this project takes longer, it takes longer, it's fine. We don't want to start on a project with university met by the entire neighborhood saying, well, you didn't listen. So wait, she was next.
Well, it was kind of like the same question. Do we need them and do we need
Well,
6?
So we cut it down to 6 based on the use patterns. I have golf course superintendents and professionals that's their job is to run my golf course. And so they're the ones that look at it. And that's why we were able to cut it down, knowing what the patterns are of golf and where you have to get to in the pro shop. So we did look at it. We have golf professionals that did that. The guys do a fantastic job taking care of the course. And people in the pro shop as well. So yeah, we looked at it. That was a number that we came up with. Now, there's options. You can reduce it even greater, and we'll, whatever the gaps are. And if you only have 3 on the course, you only have 3 on the course.
My concern is the one that the woman, she brought up, that the ugly truth that no one wants to talk about. But there's a woman that sleeps on the bench of Anderson, Corway and Anderson. She's been sleeping there. And
Well,
I'm sorry for those people,
Right.
but you're inviting more of that by doing that.
Well, you bring up a good point, and it's whenever I go to community meetings and we talk about parks, that's always a concern. So we do have I don't know if that bench on Corway Anderson has the separator. There's usually a separator, so you can't lay on it. So we'll have to look at what that bench is. We try to outfit all our benches with a separator. I will tell you, there was one particular person who was so skinny that they were able to get under it. I mean, they must have weighed 80 pounds. That's the one person that we couldn't deter, but we were able to find them and move them all on their way. But so there is ways to have inhibitors there. We do them on Pond Circle Park. If you notice, we have the dividers in there. So there's a way that we can do that. Even on the concrete bench, if you look at along the mile where they have the little balls, if you put them on the mile, they're only on the edges, but you can put them along the middle, and you can raise them up so that it's very uncomfortable. You can't lay down on them. Yes, sir.
Both the city manager and the architects have mentioned the item of cost. And if we're thinking that cost is a constraint, why not go to something simple like we have? You can build them out of wood and replace them every 10 years for a fraction.
It's important to note that there's currently a DOJ settlement with the city of Coral Gables. So what's been identified is every park, open facility has to be audited and reviewed for ADA. So those existing shelters currently do not meet ADA. So it's been identified already by the DOJ as part of the settlement that the city has, that they have X amount of time to, rectify those situations and make sure that they're ADA accessible. So when we talk in scheme of numbers, if they're reduced, one can look at maybe one on each side. I think those are things that can be talked about, but you have to keep in mind that whatever is there needs to be ADA accessible. And that's not the city saying it. We have to comply with the DOJ and federal requirements.
And I know I heard that there was some, Mayor, you brought up that some of your friends said, well, it might not necessarily have to be. So I think based on the settlement, it might have been, maybe it didn't have to be, but that was what the city agreed to or the settlement, so that's why it has to be that way.
Can't the design be made compliant, but to keep the design that we currently have?
So originally the architects mentioned that if you do that with the original design and make it ADA, it will grow substantially in size. So now you're not going to have a little gazebo-like
You already
structure.
have something that's grown at least twice the size of this right now.
Yeah, the design say would be bigger.
I think that we refer to the architects. They're the experts here.
Yeah, I'm not.
The existing one is 11 by 11, and when you grow it, you're going to be growing it in both directions. So in the and height too.
15 by 15 is
Yeah,
so smaller
right.
than that.
Well, not really, because we're able to turn it. We turn the shelter depending on where it is to be able to be more in line with the parallel to the drive, to the asphalt
The car
approach.
path.
Yeah.
But we can look at that.
Yeah, we
I
can.
mean,
So I want to note with the one that was identified to be refurbished and restored, that shelter would just be kind of a symbol. It's not a usable shelter.
yes.
If we did what you were suggesting, I'm afraid that you are gonna end up, if we comply with all the, with the structural requirements for the hurricane code. And when you take into account the larger size, the larger members that it would need to have, the structure it won't look like what you have. You're gonna have like a grand gazebo with big structural members. We haven't really done the exercise yet, but I anticipate that it won't look as delicate as the small little gazebos that you probably that you reference, and you say it's not gonna look like that. You may not like it once you see. I'm just thinking out loud.
So do we are we hearing that don't put them up at all, go back to the drawing board, let's see what we can do, if we can do anything. We might not be able to do anything and just, as they go, because we're not allowed to refurbish them once they're, because of the settlement. But yes.
I don't know why you can't make new ones to look just like the existing ones, only use plastic, wood, and cement board. And
Well,
then they wouldn't rot. They'd be good for another 50 years. And they wouldn't offend anybody.
you can, but there's a couple of things that I'm not the building and zoning person, but I think those materials might not be allowed. I'm not sure. I'm not an expert in that. I don't know if I have anybody who's an expert in that here, but also it's still the size. It can't be the same size. It would have to be bigger. Now, other options that we looked at is, if we want to do, if we have the design like we have there with any tweaks that need to be made, we don't do 6 of them, and we could do 1 on each end and 1 in the middle. There's 3 total, plus the pro shop counts as the 4th one, and you're done. That's something we've looked at, because we've looked at all possible options. Or
you know, we can go back to the drawing board and see, if we can come up with a more cost-effective, smaller footprint. I'm not sure if we can, I can't promise that we can, but I can promise we can look at it. Yeah, I figured.
One of those.
Afraid you're gonna say that. No,
Those new brain huts that could go, the money for one of those brain huts would go a long way to help her recover.
All I can say is I'm here to discuss the pro shop, and I'm here to discuss the shelter. That's all that I have any knowledge about. I apologize, but, and I didn't hear anything in terms of the pro shop and the overall, the outside windows and the actual operation part that I was on, the golfer was fine, right?
Everybody was happy with extending the space to the restaurant space.
Yeah, we got a little question.
Okay. So the commentary reads, the city should start over with the design, and I'm assuming they reference the shelter design.
Yes, they were listening to me. All right, so, you know, we'll do that. You know, we'll move ahead with the pro shop, and we'll have to look at what we do with the shelter design. And we'll move forward with that as we stand. And, could be good news or bad news for our designers, because they might get to do more stuff and make more money for new designs. So
It's important to note, though, because of the structural integrity of what's there, we cannot repurpose and restore them. So if they become a danger, or if they start collapsing, you know, nature will take its course. There's nothing we can do there, and that's important to note. And naturally, they're already not in the best conditions. The ones we've left there are the best that they are.
okay.
Sure, we can segment over to. We have a raised hand who's so respectful of everybody's time here.
I'm Frank Cooper. I live at 907 Alhambra Circle. My house is 93 years old. I'm 83 years old. And I've been eating at Burger Box for 27 years, and I would like to continue to do so.
Is there any additional commentary on, now that we've opened the floor for that direction? Yes.
Yeah, so what's going to happen? Are you going to have a meeting for that, or it's set in stone, you have 60 days for these bids and that's that?
So I will turn that question over to our economic development partner or to the
We
city manager.
we have a complete renovation of that area. The restaurant is quite old, it needs renovation, it's not what it should be. And there's quite a bit of money required for that. So we have a procurement process, and we're going to go through the procurement process. Anybody can bid on it, and anybody can come in and provide a proposal. Nothing has been set. We do have an unsolicited proposal, but that will be evaluated as part of the overall proposals that come in. Bob is a very nice person. I like him a lot, but we have to remodel that. It's not in good shape, and it requires quite a bit of money, and it's something that the city we're not prepared to put that kind of money into a restaurant that doesn't belong to the city. So we have proposals that we have our procurement process that we will be going through, and that's what we're planning to do.
Well, but I don't think concerns of the residents have anything to do with the decision-making process. And it seems like the vast majority here are.
I think you do, and you do, but this is a business that the city, Burger Bob's is a business that leases from our city. We have given Burger Bob's the best deal possible. He's paying $1,000 through the COVID to get him to the end of his lease. We haven't given that deal to any one of our other tenants. Remember, that's not our only tenant. We have quite a number of other tenants. And so we have given the best deal possible, but we need to remodel that area. We're doing a complete renovation of that pro shop. It's costing us quite a bit of money, $150,000. We don't have any more money to spend on a restaurant that really does not belong to the city. So anyone that wishes to provide a proposal during that period can do so. And we will be looking at all the proposals that come in through that period. Yes, ma'am.
Is it a matter of being able to I mean, are you offering a severance with $1,000 a month? Is that a severance or is?
We lowered we lowered his lease to that. He does owe, and remember, he has not paid, and he owes, but I don't want to get into that. I think what we want to do is carry him to the end, and he does owe a number of $1,000s. We lowered his lease to $1,000, which is the highest reduction we've given anyone. We've given a special reduction.
I understand
Just
that. That's wonderful.
however, we are not, but I'm not prepared to put in $500,000 to remodel Burger Bob's. I can't do that. I can't do that. It's an outside business, and that's not what we do.
But I think my question is, the tailgate one is, has there been somebody that has offered?
We have an unsolicited proposal. However, we will go through normal procurement. I'm not taking that unsolicited proposal. We will go through normal procurement to make sure that whatever we do is through our procurement process.
And is it only the dollars at this point?
We cannot,
Because if indeed you have it.
I cannot justify putting $500,000 for a private business. I can't do that. I'm sorry, I can't.
Now, does it have to be $500,000?
We have to remodel that. Nothing's happened in a restaurant for about 30 years.
Right, but the
There are
windows.
issues right now with that restaurant. We cannot keep it open with those issues.
I
There
understand
are
that.
issues right now.
But if
and I
you look
can't-
at hurricane-proof windows, the roof is good. If indeed, let's say Rita and her team with Bob, as Burger Bob's comes back in again and does furniture,
If they
interior,
can come in and we will be accepting proposals from everyone. If they wish to provide a proposal, they certainly can.
is there, yeah, that's a good question. Is there a list of the deficiencies that you see are a must for changing? Then they know what footing they're on.
We have that area, and the one that you saw, we expanded slightly to include the bathroom so that the restaurant can stay open different hours than the actual pro shop. And then we have some small outside dining. That's basically what we want, but there needs to be the kitchen area there in the back needs to be remodeled. That's quite a bit of money. And the city does not do that work for the private sector. And Burger Bob's is the private sector.
But Burger Bob's will be given consideration on a proposal that they. submit.
Absolutely, of course.
Like,
Bids are going to take care of the remodeling themselves.
Yes, we want whoever comes in to remodel that entire area at their cost, not the city.
So we have a couple of raised hands, so I want to make sure we get to everybody. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. You've made it clear that the city is the owner of the building. That's obvious. And that it's the city's responsibility to maintain it, improve it, make it safe. And you're saying that you will accept submissions. Couldn't the city also put stipulations in those submissions? And I'm just going to throw out an idea here. Maybe Burger Bob could still go on if it was a stipulation. You can have a menu.
I can understand. I understand. You all like Burger Bob's. I've
No,
gone to Burger
but
Bob's.
sir, just let me finish.
Of course.
I'm not really trying to urge anything. I'm just throwing out a suggestion. So, the city, to preserve the history, I mean, after all, Bob is getting a little feeble and old. So there is maybe a closing moment for him sometime. But in the wisdom of the city, you could have a stipulation that says this restaurant will always have this name. That would have some historical, or you could say.
I just discussed that. Now we're going to look at maintaining the name, and that's something that we will be looking at. Because I do realize that Burger Bob's, the name and so forth. So we will be looking at that. Possibly, is it something that can be worked out?
I'm not just throwing out some ideas in order for this group to feel a little more.
Let me say that we are considering that already.
Okay.
We are considering that already.
Or you could even say there's going to be a special menu for seniors called Bob's. We'll get you a special. Seniors might get a price break on these little menu items over here. I mean, there's probably a way to preserve the idea of tradition.
We are,
Just think it through.
well, let me just say this, that we're already working, already considering that idea of somehow maintaining, working something out with the burger box, and I have discussed that already, to see if we can maintain the name burger box there, because it's been a tradition, so, but we do need an upgrade to the restaurant. Definitely do an upgrade to the restaurant. Upgrade a restaurant is not cheap, and it's a private sector. Yes, of course, I'm sorry.
Renovation of burger box is not going to require an added addition to the building. It's already, the building is already.
Yes, ma'am, it's
fixed.
yes, sir.
It's in the function.
That is
So the building is safe. The roofing.
It's all safe.
The windows, everything comes in under the renovation of the
Yes.
function.
Yes, the building is safe. What we're doing is changing the windows to impact windows to try to have 24/7 protection. And what we're doing is expanding a little bit on the inside, but the outside stays the same. The building stays the same.
It's going to be, that's going to be on the pro shop.
Yes, yeah, correct. There's no expansion in the building. No, there's no additions to it.
Construction and the housing of the pro shop and burger box is all under this. It's all.
Yes, that is correct. Yes.
It's the city expense. That part, it's the city expense.
Yes, the pro shop is the city expense. The restaurant is what we're looking at to go up. Inside.
And that internal change was directly a result from the initial community meeting that we had on the pro shop. It was requested to increase the size, and a lot of responses that we got during COVID was access to restrooms outside of the operations of the pro shop. There's an existing restroom in the back that would allow for access and renovation to that restroom.
That area, that restroom is not ADA compatible. There's a lot of work that needs to be done back there. The coolers are huge. It's quite dated, and there's a lot of work. So yes.
Yeah, I understand that whoever has the restaurant is responsible for the restaurant stuff, but you're implying that whoever gets this restaurant now is going to have to build a bathroom? Isn't that the city's job?
Well, they're going to have
That
remodeled.
sounds like the city's job.
They're going to remodel the bathroom in the restaurant area to make sure it complies with ADA.
But you're moving the wall.
We're moving the wall slightly to allow them the room to have that ADA bathroom so that if the pro shop closes, the restaurant doesn't have to close with it.
It would be helpful to have a list of who's responsible for what.
Well, we have that. That's done, and we have a
Make
floor
that
plan.
public?
We just showed you the floor plan where we're just moving
But I
that
don't know
wall.
who's responsible for what,
The restaurant is responsible for the restaurant area, and we're
including the bathroom.
including that bathroom, and we're responsible for the pro shop and the locker rooms and so. Right, those improvements would be by the restaurant.
That's not part of the reconstruction of the pro shop.
No.
No.
Right now, it's an
We're
existing.
making the pro shop slightly smaller. It is too large right now, and so just a little expansion of the restaurant to be able to facilitate using those bathroom facilities. Yes, no. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, yes, ma'am.
I just have a little bit of a question. I'm just kind of curious. So when, say, Venetian Pool that has a catering service or has a food service there, when they have to make changes and upgrades to their facility there, isn't it the city that takes those?
That's a change in operations. That's actually operated and managed by city staff. So it's not a lease, it's not an outside company. Our own staff manages that restaurant space. We maintain the licenses. All the staff is retained by the city, and that's a part of our expenditure accounts as well as revenue accounts that are part of the city's budget.
You mentioned that both the pro shop and the restaurant may not be open at the same time. My understanding was that they both kind of open and close together.
Pretty much, if the restaurant might, if the pro shop closes at 6, the restaurant might close at 9.
But is your intention of keeping the restaurant open later?
Slightly. If they open, if the pro shop closes at 6, let's say, during the winter, the restaurant might stay open until 8:30 at night. So there might be a slight difference in that.
It's going to be similar to what's happening at the Liberty, it's supposed to be closed.
Liberty Cafe is that what we're doing is through COVID, that COVID plan is over January 15th of next year. So it was done just for COVID.
So all of that is going to go back inside.
That would be done at that time. It's just to get people out because of course of the pandemic. Yes, ma'am.
Quick question. When the pro shop was originally planned, going back many, many years, who was in charge of putting in the kitchen equipment? Whoever overtook it, or was it the city?
I don't know who originally put burger, where
Because it wasn't always
burger
Burger
box 30 years ago, but that hasn't been, nothing has been done on that restaurant upgrades for that length of time. So I don't know what happened.
Whose job, as she's saying, if Venetian Pool is owned by the city and the city manages the employees there, I do understand that Burger Bob's Kitchen, that is part of the pro shop. So with the kitchen equipment, the coolers, as you mentioned, et cetera.
Once a restaurant, there's a wall, there's a clear delineation between the restaurant and the pro shop. We're just expanding that.
Yeah, I think in terms of a clarification, the Burger Bob's is a lease.
I'm just saying restaurant.
No, exactly. The Burger Bob's restaurant, it is leased. It is leased to Burger Bob's to run as a business. Venetian Pool, it is a city business. It's not leased to anybody. It is run by the city. So everything is maintained by the city because the city operates it. The city gets all the revenue. The city has all the entire operation. That's the difference in the two spaces.
Right, so who put in the kitchen equipment before Bob's was even there?
I don't know.
And who maintains that?
I don't know who did that 30 years ago.
The city, should the city be
No.
responsible for the coolers and the
No.
upkeep?
No, that's the restaurant too. That's, when we have a lease, if we lease one of our properties, there is a tenant improvement. Package that they do, that's part of the tenant improvements. And they're responsible for the tenant improvements. We do not maintain the tenant improvements. It's a responsibility of the tenant.
Okay.
Okay? Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry,
I'm buying both.
okay, well, yes, excuse me.
I certainly hope that if you are successful in keeping the name Burger Bob's, that you will also try and preserve some of the historic furniture that is in there. That furniture is better quality than you can go out there and buy.
Yes, wonderful. Those chairs are beautiful.
The chairs and tables were bought by the city. At one point, I don't remember when.
The tables and chairs are rusted to the gills.
I know. She was just saying.
You see,
I was just, I said, hey, you're preaching to the choir. I was just explaining.
Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering, is there a way to make Bob's like a city business?
Make Bob's
A city business, and then
No,
the
ma'am,
city
no,
would
we
pay.
don't want to do that right now. It's too expensive and we really want us to have a tenant there that can renovate that. We want a tenant that can go in, put sufficient funds so that can renovate that. If not, we would have a cost much higher than $850,000. One last question. Thank you all very much. Much appreciated, everyone.
I gotta end the meeting. Thank you for all who attended virtually. Again, we really apologize for the poor audio and the technical difficulties. We want to thank you for joining us We will be concluding this meeting. If you have any other concerns, please email us at parksprojects@coralgables.com. We'd be happy to respond accordingly. Again, we apologize for any audio issues we had. We did our best to run this first event as a hybrid event. So thank you again for attending.